Have you ever wondered what the city landscape looked like in the late 17th century? It's difficult to come by illustrations of that time. And if you're looking for illustrations of Sweden's city life, a small country up in the cold north, it's even harder. Other European countries saw Sweden as a cultural backwater, making small impressions on the outside world. Sweden was, however, changing, growing and evolving, becoming a superpower. But the citizens of Europe did not know so much about Sweden, and why should they? This, however, got one person thinking, and his name was Erik Dahlbergh, a military man with great passion for illustrations. He took upon himself to illustrate Sweden as a modern, educated country. And thanks to him, we have engravings of 353 plates of important cities, buildings and cultural artifacts from that time. In other words, we can get an insight into their worldview, see the world through their eyes, and how they view their own time period, but also how they perceive Sweden's history from their point of view. This book was named Suecia, Antiqua et Modernea, roughly meaning Sweden of the past and present. And the main purpose of this was to be used as a propaganda tool for Sweden's newly acquired great power in the Baltic area. Erik Dahlbergh was a man who came from a modest background, was raised in a foster home and managed to climb the social ladder, and made this book his passion project after his primary military career. But the book had more than the intention of documenting Sweden as a country and displaying it to the world. The intention was to create a propaganda piece, to tell a story, and to display Sweden the way he saw it, and what he thought Sweden could be. A more cultural and educated country, which at this time it wasn't. Erik Dahlbergh wanted to elevate Sweden to the ranks of other European cultural nations. In true style with Venice or Rome, Sweden at this time had great power, but they came with an inferiority complex. Travelogues from that time depicted Sweden as the bare landscape, a cold and isolated place, and that Sweden had a problem with the devils in Lapland. They also thought that the country had a barbaric Nordins who tormented the civilized population of the south. In other words, Sweden's honor and glory was at stake. The country could not boast the same cultural history and artistic ambition as the other countries. Sweden during this time was not taken nearly as seriously by the European old powers as they wanted it. The country was new to the political arena after King Charles XII's war that caused Sweden's border to expand almost along the entire Baltic Sea, making Sweden a force to be reckoned with. So how does Erik want to portray Sweden? He began by creating a panoramic view of Stockholm, the biggest city in Sweden, which by European standards wasn't even a big city. The second largest city in Sweden after Stockholm at this time, and still is, was Gothenburg, with a population of approximately 6,000 inhabitants, which, in other words, is a small country village compared to London at this time, with a population of around 500,000 people. Stockholm at this time had at most 60,000 people living in the city. Of course, the nobility wanted to present their own grand buildings and gardens, so much that even some of the buildings at the time of the engraving didn't even exist in real life. Some of the ideas became reality, but most of them never did due to various obstacles and financial issues. The project took longer than Erik Dahlbergh had expected. He also wanted to showcase Sweden's ancient history and, in his mind, its rightful place alongside the ideas of ancient Greece and the Roman Empire. The Old Norse research had a strong propaganda purpose and was an attempt to show Europe that Sweden's history was superior to antiquity, which of course it wasn't, but at the time they didn't know. So much in fact that the culture movement in Sweden tried to explain that Sweden was in fact the sunken city of Atlantis. Olof Rudebeck's written work ATLANTICA explained how Sweden's history, nature, people and folk tales was identical to the sunken Atlantis, and thus aimed to cement the significant value of Sweden. This movement was called Gotheism and was a romantic nationalistic movement in Sweden, and these ideas became a part of Erik Dahlbergh's book Suecia. For example, this, an engraving of old Uppsala hillocks. People wanted to believe it was the remains of old pagan gods. Others believed that the mounds were just ordinary hills, but in fact they were graves from the pagan time, and this was in Suecia. Final result. Suecia was a difficult and very extensive project that spanned several decades, and where the author, Erik Dahlbergh, never got to see its completion. Over the years there were several different visions of what the book should be, from nationalistic propaganda text to engravings from places Dahlbergh wanted to visit. The communication between him and the engravers, who lived in Holland, France and so on, took a lot of time and was exhausting. And with no access to high-speed internet as we have today, a lot of edits didn't make the cut, which is the main reason why we today see the engraving as pure fantasy, since many of them never existed. A small church on Dahlbergh's sketch can almost look like a cathedral in its size. For example, this one, Tuna, a big mansion with a large garden, a small harbor, and smaller buildings surrounding the main building. But in reality, only the main building in the middle, the stone house, really existed. Both then and now. Everything else was visions that never fulfilled, but that didn't matter to Dahlbergh, because they represent an idea, the vision of Sweden at the forefront. Dahlbergh even explained this in a letter to his engraver Wilhelm Swide. On November the 30th, 1689, he wrote, "We need to help the reality by bringing forth the beauty, and no one will ever notice." When the book was finished, it was given as gifts to envoys, diplomats and foreign ministers, and for them to see Sweden as Dahlbergh did. A showcase of Sweden as a great power, a propaganda tool which in our days is one of the most important pieces of art that has given historians a lot of material and insight into what Sweden really looked like in the 17th century. The main source for this video came from a book called The Dream of Great Power by Börje Magnusson and Jonas Nordin, and the Royal Library Collection of Suecia. They have dedicated a whole homepage where you can scroll through all the engravings that Erik Dahlbergh created. And when I was working on this script and video, I paused several times to zoom in and watch the people in the engravings. All thanks to the digital copies that was available online for you to see. If you want to see Suecia's work, you can see all the pictures on this page, but I also recommend going to this website, where you can see Dahlbergh's picture of castles and mansions and compare it to what it looked like today.